Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more. There is more and more data available to anybody in any type of company, thanks to the tools that we're using, automation, tracking, all these abilities that technology has afforded us. And yet sales and sales teams continue to be behind on the times when it comes to actually putting all of that stuff into use and the data that it's offering us. So teams are either running off of very limited data or worse, no data at all, like anecdotal evidence and gut feelings. So that's not great. And as a sales leader, if you're not looking for the right data and you're not using it to take action, there's absolutely no way you're going to create measurable, repeatable, scalable results. That is what we're going to tackle in today's episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Hicks. And today on the Predictable Revenue Podcast, we're going to be talking about why you should be doing data-driven sales management. So my guest, he is a serial founder and seasoned early stage SaaS executive advisor and investor. He co-founded Talent Bin, which is a category defining talent search engine and recruiting CRM, which exited to Monster Worldwide in early 2014. And he's currently the co-founder of Atrium, makers of the data-driven sales management software that helps managers use data to improve team performance. In addition to all that, he founded and runs Modern Sales Pros. I'm sure you guys know of Modern Sales Pros. It's the world's largest sales operations and management peer education community. He's also the founder or the author of Founding Sales, the authoritative handbook on early stage go-to-market for founders and other non-sales people. He's an active angel investor, and he focuses primarily on B2B SaaS and marketplaces. Yep, there's the book. We'll definitely talk about that at the end and where you can find that. So,
oh my God, Sarah, you are like amazing.
Peter
Damn,
Kazanjy,
dog.
Welcome.
You got it. Wow, you're good at this game. Like I should have you be my hype person every time.
Yes.
Right, just like before every webinar, just like Sarah gets into the ring and it's just like running around, like get excited.
I would love that job.
I think you have more important things to do, homegirl.
Maybe. Don't know if Colin, the CEO, would be too keen on that as my new job description. But you know what?
I don't think so. But it's a good skill profile to have. Thank you for the thank you for the fantastic introduction. How are you doing?
Of course, I'm doing great. I'm so excited to have you on. You obviously have such a great wealth of knowledge, and you've done the thing of getting the teams from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, getting them past this big hurdle of like not being able to use data and then being able to figure it all out and use it to scale. So I can't wait to pick your brain on this.
Totally. I mean, when we were prepping for this, like I'm excited for the conversation because like you've done it yourself as an SDR manager, and then of course like as an enablement person, and given the fact that like you're somebody who's not afraid of math, not afraid of metrics.
Mm-hmm.
We typically find this is that some of the more junior in their career, like managers and leaders, are less like data resistant, nay data hostile. Sometimes we see that we're like you get on a call and like some gray hair looks like me or what have you, and you're like, oh, let's see, right? Versus somebody who's come up in a Strava, Whoop, Peloton sort of like post Moneyball environment with like, of course you would use like. How could you not use data to measure and improve the performance of whatever activity is being done right now? Like what are you smoking, right? So I'm excited about the conversation.
Me too. Let's kind of take it right back up to why this is important, just at a kind of foundational level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was doing a webinar earlier on kind of like Moneyball. And and how it's like transformed the concept of Moneyball and like analytics, and how it's transformed the the like advanced athletics. And really what it kind of comes down to is just like advantage, right? Like we're always looking for advantage. because it makes our sales organizations more effective, right? It can make us, we can raise bookings on a per rep basis. It can raise opportunity creation on a per SDR basis, what have you. And so using like managing by metric and what we like to call data-driven sales management, which is what we do here at Atrium, which in short, it's helping managers use data and metrics to improve the performance of their team. So AE managers, SDR managers, AM, CSM managers. It's just a source of advantage, and it allows you to see around corners. It allows you to, track progress towards goals, not just on outputs like bookings or opportunity creation, but on inputs as well. Because by tracking those inputs and the intermediaries, you're going to be able to see around corners, and then importantly, intervene. The phrase that we like to say is that you can intervene when something is an issue before it becomes a problem, right? Like you can jump on that rep when their new opportunity inflow is like deteriorating, versus waiting for that to be a deterioration in stage 4 ops, or a deterioration in like their forecast, or in like their forward-looking pipe, or what have you. You could, like, if you can bird dog those inputs, then you're not going to get surprised. Moreover, what you can do, and this is a really as a manager, you exist to improve the performance of your team. That's literally why you exist. You are not there to close deals for them, right? And then more like you're not there to deal coaching is one piece of what you do, but just helping reps on each individual deal is like not very scalable. Instead, what you want to do is you want to make them more effective broadly. And so in order to make that rep more effective broadly, you have to know what is ineffective about them right now, like what the hitch in their swing or their shot or whatever is, because then we can then coach to that, fix that hitch, which will then elevate their performance. And now that elevated performance will impact all of their deals or all of their prospect engagements if you're talking about an SDR. And the same is true on the reverse side around taking high performance, because you're always going to have reps that are going to be figuring things out, kind of doing clever things, identifying that, and then rather than it just being that rep, you can take that and then spread it across the rest of your team. Well, again, now what you've done is you've raised everybody's performance. And so the way to do this is through measurement and data-driven sales management, which is a required capability for modern sales managers, sales leaders, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all so clear where those impacts are going to be. You identify either that area that's a challenge, or the area that is causing someone to excel. And if you can capture that, understand it, and either replicate it or put a stop to it, the downstream impacts across that team are going to be massive. So talk to me. Let's talk first about the sales development sort of prospecting side. Then we'll talk about the AE or closing side. So
Sure.
For sales development, for prospecting, how do you just get set up with kind of like the minimum viable data? Where do you even start?
Yeah. So, gosh, I do a bunch of masterclasses on this. If folks want to check it out, just go to atriumhq.com and click on the resources tab. I have like a bunch of recordings on like different classes on, setting and managing goals, SDR, like data-driven SDR management, et cetera, et cetera. So in short, really what you want to do is just like, first, just start. And what that means is don't overthink it. This is oftentimes what we find in organizations that we're working with, is like, we'll talk to an organization. One of the value propositions of Atrium is that like it's extraordinarily easy to set up. It takes like 5 minutes to turn on. You just like, Salesforce, you just sign in with your Salesforce account, and like in 5 minutes you have a world-class metrics harness. So, but like oftentimes what we'll do is we'll talk with a customer, and like they're kind of like lost in the woods, because they're like, well, we got to think about all the different metrics that we want to track, and they're trying to like boil the ocean, as opposed to just saying like, hey, like what's the minimum viable version of this? Okay, if you're talking about SDRs, it's like, let's track emails, calls, right? Like those are inputs. Let's look at some quality metrics. So let's look at email response rate. Let's look at connect rate. Let's look at and then let's look at conversion between unique accounts or like leads engaged, and then like opportunity output there. And then from an output standpoint, let's look at opportunity creation, and then maybe let's like sum it up, right? Like pipeline creation, right? If you start with that, like what we've got right there is a very basic, like we got very basic inputs, emails, calls, maybe some other gesture, like whatever the engagement gesture might be. We've got quality, because you have to measure quantity and quality. And then you got your outputs as well. If you just started doing that, literally, if you just started like writing on a whiteboard, that would be okay. Just start. So that's the first thing. And then the next thing, then you start kind of going to like the second level on this. And actually, we have these really helpful like desk reference like laminates here that have all the, I don't know if you can see that okay, but like if you go to atriumhq.com/laminates, you can actually get a free copy of these. But because then there's like, I don't know if you're much of a skier, Sarah. But then you can kind
go
of
off in a ski town, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Right. So like you can go from bunny hill to then like blue slope, right? And that might be, okay, what would be the next thing that you'd want to pay attention to as an SDR? And that might be like unique accounts interacted with, right? Unique contacts interacted with. Like you could have someone who's sending a bunch of email, but if they're only engaging a small set of like unique contacts, like that's probably a bad idea, because those people are probably getting pissed, right? And it's not like a lot of at bat. So maybe it's unique contacts, unique accounts, new accounts, right? New contacts, because you got to have fresh blood coming in, because then you're going to process them through whatever your sales engagement, solution might be. So like those might be the next level of those input metrics. And then you would look at like more quality, like you could enhance your quality metrics as well. Like, okay, cool. We were talking about email response rate and like connect rate and conversion rate there. Well, then what are the quality, like behavioral quality indicators? That might be, how multi-threaded are we? Are we engaging a high number of contacts in each of these accounts? Because oftentimes we see this where SDRs, they get an account and like maybe they grab one persona out of the data source or whatever, and like they go ham after that person, versus spreading their net within an account and maybe targeting 3 or 5 or 10, whatever the the best practice might be for your specific sales motion or prospecting motion. So contacts per account, touches per account. Like, are we touching them once and like putting it down again and be like, I don't know, I need more leads, right? So like those would be, because these are the sort of things that then you start kind of being able to diagnose where the shortfalls are in the team. It's like, oh, I see what's going on here. SDR, you're putting in lots of activity metric, like you're putting in lots of activity, lots of emails, like you're engaging lots of accounts, and also we've got new accounts coming in. Man, the opportunity output isn't there. What's going on there? Geez. Oh, look, you're only engaging one contact per account. I think I see something for us to coach, right? Or alternatively, oh man, this person's really putting in the work. They're doing lots of emails, like they're engaging new contacts and new accounts. They're touching quite a bit and they're multi-threaded, but boy, oh boy, like the opportunity creation is not there. What's the deal there? Oh, look at that email response rate. It's in the pits. Yeah. What's the deal there? Oh, like let's look at the content that they're, let's look, are they using the right sequences, right? Is their contact selection appropriate? Oh, you're selecting the wrong personas from from ZoomInfo or what have you. So like getting to that next level now allows you to kind of more accurately see where the hitch and the giddy up might be. And then you can kind of go from there and get like, more like double black diamond, like some of the organizations we work with, because the Atrium has like hundreds of these metrics that are just like pre-baked. Things like win rate on opportunities that an SDR sources. Because sometimes not just how many ops are being created by the SDR, but like how many stage ones, like how many of the ops that they create are getting to stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3, because like all opportunity creation is not created equal. But that's like more like double black diamond stuff that our customers get to with the help of our customer success team.
Yeah, but I hear you. It starts with a very simple bunch of metrics, which, like you say, it's like this is all you need to know at a foundational level to just understand what is happening from there, once you get what's going on there, you can start layering in these, you're basically like splitting up those metrics into their parts, so that you start to see this really long chain of events that leads from like brand new cold prospect all the way through to, closed deal. And as far into that process as you want to, kind of track that from the SDR perspective. But that totally makes sense. And so you've got this information, you're tracking it, you've got it in these really effective dashboards, you have all the visibility you need. How does the sales manager then take that to the team? Like, what does that look like? Because I imagine there's quite a lot there. How do you kind of, how do you action on that?
Yeah, so I think so we just talked about SDR, and of course you can do the same thing with account executives as well. Like the analogs would be like customer facing meeting volume, like the basics would be like customer facing meeting volume, customer op touches, ops in pipe, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's kind of like the blue square. The next thing is, it really is important to operationalize it, right? And so what that means is like weaving it into your operating rhythm. So if you think about how a sales organization ought to be run, it's really just like a series of like meetings, right? And it's maybe it's stand-up meetings once every day. It's meetings and then the content associated with those meetings. So in your sales team meeting, you should have relevant metrics that you're paying attention to, right? So like that should be an agenda document that is prepared for by the sales leader. I like to prepare for my sales. I actually have an hour blocked at the beginning of Monday to go through that agenda doc, and literally I just clone it. Like I have a template, I clone it. And it has hyperlinks to a bunch of Atrium assets, some Salesforce assets as well. And literally what you're doing is just like going through it, and kind of like looking at things like, okay, are we at the level of like opportunity creation that we expected? How's our opportunity inflow with respect to our account executives? What does our net new account engagement look like across our entire SDR team? All the sort of things that we were just describing before. Now you actually have to make sure that it's being consumed on a recurring basis. And so that might be team level and then per rep in order to help you for that sales team meeting. For pipeline reviews, it's probably a different set of metrics, right? Like that's probably more like a list of ops that you're looking at that are maybe forecast for this month and next month, depending on your sales motion. And then in your one-on-ones with your reps, this is kind of like where a lot of the work is being done. Is in those one-on-ones. One of the things that we really coach our customers on is that like deal strategy and pipe review should be separate from coaching one-on-ones. And so your coaching one-on-ones should be focused on the things we were talking about earlier about like there's a thing that we're working on, and it ought to be different on a per rep basis, and we're improving that behavior. Right, we're like, and it's probably not multiple because working on too many things concurrently is a recipe for like not getting anything done. But it's probably something, right? Like, hey, we're working with you on your top of funnel conversion because we've observed that your conversion out of meeting pending and disco is lighter than everybody else, or the thing that we're working on with you is your prospecting activity because like you have a pipe deficit and we just need to get your activity up because you came to being an account executive from a customer success background and not from an SDR background, and so like maybe you're like you don't have that activity muscle. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all right. We're gonna go ahead and fix that for you, right? And so having that operating rhythm in place that has the relevant metrical assets associated with it, and then just making sure that you're like looping back, right? And when you're coaching, like it's observing a potential issue with respect to a rep, and like it might not be an issue per se. It's just everybody has improvement areas. Even folks who are top performing, like what's the next thing that you want to get them to? Do we want to raise their ASPs? Do we want to see if they can get do we want to see if they can actually like get 20%, like manage 20% more ops, kind of like take them to the edge of their capacity? So like figure out whatever that next kind of critical path is, and then work that. and then loop back on it. One of my favorite books on sales management is 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach. It's written by Corey Bray and Helen Story. It's just like a really delightful book that's written as a narrative, super fun. It's like a parable, like it's not very like dry at all. And just like making sure that you have the thing that you're focused on. You're prescribing actions associated with that. There's accountability set up for like the actions that you're prescribing are very clear. Like you're going to prospect 100 accounts on like for the first half of the day on Thursday, and we're going to measure it this way right here, and then we're going to come back together for our one-on-one next Wednesday, and like we're going to look at this report and see if it actually has happened or not. And if it has, we're going to give high fives and we're going to do it again, or maybe move on to the next thing. If it hasn't, we're going to have a conversation about that. And just like, just continue to run that operating rhythm. And that's how you like lift all the ships, if you will.
Yeah. Very interesting. I'm curious to understand of this data. I understand that the sales manager wants to be able to see all of it to kind of like the appropriate degree of, specificity depending on their sales motion. How much of this stuff should a rep themselves be looking at on these kind of regular cadences? Like how much is too much for a rep?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question, because what we find is that like, look, this is the job of the manager. Like the job of the manager is to improve rep performance. And so the way that you improve rep performance is by figuring out what the potential shortfall is, and then coaching a potential resolution to that. But one of the things that we find is that like, especially with it's kind of like the reps that are going to grow up to be managers. We totally see this in our customers. You're like, all right, I get it. We see it in like our usage metrics too. You see some reps who are just like they're on their own Atrium profile. They're looking at their own metrics. What's also funny is they're on other reps' Atrium profiles as well. And they're kind of like, what is so-and-so doing? What is what do their activities look like? I mean, it's just like the Peloton leaderboard or what have you. But it's not just like the outputs, right? Which is like kind of the old school way of doing leaderboards. It's like, okay, what about their behaviors is different? I think like a reasonable amount of like curiosity and kind of like self-management there can be very powerful. But how about this? As long as it doesn't deteriorate your activity metrics.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, as long as it's preserving, you're not taking your whole call block to poke around in the metrics. Okay, let's talk about how you actually create your coaching based on the things that you're looking at here. You mentioned that there's always going to be sort of rep by rep coaching on an individual basis, and there will likely be more broad kind of team coaching that you can implement across the board as well. So how are you taking this data and then designing a coaching plan?
Yeah, and I think you've got your coach hat on here and your enablement hat here, and I think you're already kind of thinking about like next level ways of operationalizing this. Like, look, I think there's two different ways of addressing like you doing data-driven coaching. There's find the thing that is find the issue that is most widespread in the organization, and then coach that, even if some people don't have it. And that's okay, right? And that might be like a specific initiative. Like there might be some sort of specific initiative that's being addressed. Like, okay, we need to do a lot more AE prospecting here, or like, hey, we've got like a big pipeline hygiene thing that we're working on. Or in SDR land, it might be, hey, we're going to get really cranked on multi-threading, and like we're really going to up level the quality of our execution, and like the quality of our prospecting activity. Then measuring that and kind of like coaching that. So like that can be initiative based. So like one, you can say, hey, we want to get across our team, we want to get our win rates up from pilot, right? Like maybe we have a pilot motion or what have you, and we're trying to get our win rates up associated with that. That could be something that you would address across the entire team. There might be some people who already have, very high win rates coming out of pilot, and maybe we interrogate them and like ask them like, okay, where does that, like what is driving that, so we can systematize it, and then we use that as a mechanism by which to kind of like bring the other people up to the same sort of levels. And then we might have assets that are specific to that initiative, like, you know, a dashboard or two, or maybe, like, to use Atrium metaphors, like maybe it's a couple of views, like a dashboard or an alert feed, or set some goals on it, etc. So that's like one way. The other way that's like a little bit more advanced is like bespoke per rep, which is kind of what we're talking about in you know, in kind of like one-on-ones, right? And like what one-on-ones are for. And so in that regard, what you want to do is look at a rep, look at their kind of like their metrics harness, if you will, kind of the things we were talking about earlier, and then just look at where the potential shortfall is. And a good mechanism by which to like determine potential shortfalls would be, how do these individuals look as compared to their peers?
Yeah.
Right? Or how do they look as compared to their past performance? If you have a deterioration as compared to past performance on a specific metric, maybe somebody's win rate is deteriorating, or somebody's average selling price is deteriorating, or their deal cycle is elongating, or their customer-facing meeting volume is deteriorating as compared to themselves historically, well, that seems like there might be a coaching opportunity there. Right. So it's like first kind of figuring out like what the biggest like hitch in their giddy up or hitch in their swing might be. Or it might be looking at them as compared to their peers and saying, where's this person at with respect to their, and you can start with like the revenue formula to start as like probably a pretty safe spot. Is like, where's their win rate as compared to everybody else? Where's their ASP as compared to everybody else? Where's their deal cycle as compared to everybody else? Where's their customer facing meeting volume as compared to everybody else? And just look for the thing that's the shortfall. Say like, wow, this person, you know, this person's like has 30% fewer customer facing meetings than the other 15 mid-market AEs on this team. Seems like something for us to address. Like, let's figure out what the deal is here. Is it because they don't have enough first meeting? And then we're like inspecting, right? Like, is it because they're not having enough first meetings? No, they have the same number of first meetings as everybody else. Oh, okay. Seems like they can't get second dates. Ah, okay. What's the issue there? Why are they not able to have these, you know, these second meetings? Great. Let's go ahead and like listen, like let's talk with them about that. Let's go ahead and listen to some of those first calls and see if we can see some shortfalls in their execution. Maybe we're going to ride along. And so this, what we're describing right now is data-driven management, or like first you're diagnosing, right? You're observing and diagnosing, because if instead the way you went about trying to manage this hypothetical team that we're talking about right here, if instead you were just trying to like ride along on everybody's calls, like that would be a disaster, right? Because you got eight AEs that you're working with. And so in this case, it's like, hey, this specific rep, in this case, we've identified that they have a problem with like first to second meeting kind of conversion. We can ride along on their first meetings and those initial calls, or go and back and listen to those calls in chorus or gong or fill in the blank. And that allows us to understand, like specifically zoom in on the thing that we need to listen to and be like, oh, got it. Okay. They're not asking for that next meeting. Great. I mean, sales 101, but like, you know, like sometimes, you know, reps, like they go sideways on their skills, like sometimes skills deteriorate. And so you need that, like, and then and that might be very different than like, I don't need to ride along on calls with somebody who is not whose development area is more prospecting activity. Like I don't need to be on their calls, right? Yeah. And so if I spent my time on their calls, that would actually be a waste of my sales management calories. And the way I could tell that is by just, again, looking at their metrics and saying, oh, okay, cool. Like your new opportunity inflow is light as compared to everybody else, like another revenue formula metric. Why is that? Oh, well, you're getting the same number of like SDR sourced opportunities to everybody else. Your self-sourced is problematic. Wonderful. We're going to teach you how to use your sales engagement software, and we're going to coach on that. But I didn't have to riding along on that person's calls would not be an effective use of management time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems that I see from a coaching perspective when kind of stepping into these companies and how they're managing their teams is there's either this one size fits all management approach where it's like, what's a thing that I can just do all day, every day? Ride-alongs, easy peasy. Or like I'll have my one-on-one and I'll tell them to tell me what their biggest challenge is. And then I'll offer ad hoc coaching for that
my
thing.
God. Oh my God. Well, that's like the worst, like that's essentially like an abdication of managerial responsibility,
100%.
right? Like that's your job as a manager is like, you are a coach. Like if you look at world-class athletics coach, whether you're talking about like, Nick Saban or Bill Belichick or Pat, oh God, what's the lady's name from Tennessee? Anyway, the really famous basketball coach. If you look at these folks, like they're constantly diagnosing their team and then coaching them up and saying like, hey, here's the shortfall. Let's make you better. Let's make you better. And I think the more that managers can realize like that is their job is to do that, is like, I'm seeing this, here's the shortfall. I mean, it's just like sales, right? Like I'm seeing this, I'm going to observe this to you. What do you think is the negative implication of like maybe not solving this problem, right? Like kind of bring them to it and like prescribe a potential solution there consultatively. Like that's your job as a sales manager. And if you're not doing that, like, these world-class coaches are not going on the field and like throwing the football or like kicking the field goal or like shooting the shots for the players. They're observing what's going on. They're seeing where the shortfall is and they're coaching it they're coaching them up to improve, to upskill them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is it your responsibility as a sales manager, but it's actually doable now in a way that it hasn't been historically. And back to the kind of anecdote at the very beginning, when you're saying like these gray hairs that are like, no, but this is sales, like leads in, black box, opportunities created, black box, closed deals. Like, I don't know, like it's just whatever. It's black magic that happens in there. It's like, well, it's not anymore. Actually, it is very clear.
Yeah, it's not anymore. And if you look at the world-class sales organizations historically, they always tried to put instrumentation, even though the instrumentation was coarse. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, like the instrumentation is very fine-grained, right? Like what we're talking about, like, oh my gosh, you're telling me you can measure how many net new contacts and SDRs engaging in any given week? It's like, hell yeah, you can. And by the way, you ought, right? You oughta. Whereas like, like you look at folks like, Parametric Technology Corporate, like PTC, and like all of the kind of diaspora associated with PTC, even like back in the day when CRMs were like pretty janky, they would just, do a very good job of making sure that there's very crisp stages and entry and exit criteria. I mean, this is like where MedPick came from, right? Like we wanted to make sure that we had, like we instantiated like criteria that we could then measure. Right. So it's like we instantiated these pieces of metadata, which then we could measure. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, but like now, like the metadata is very accessible because all of our communication is digital, right? So like our emails, our calendars, our Zoom calls, et cetera, it's all like instrumented and recorded. Sorry, it's not instrumented, but like it's all recorded. It's like logged.
Yeah.
And so now like it's all about the advantage thing they were talking about earlier. It's like, if you're not taking advantage of this, you're really just like putting yourself, at a disservice. And this is something that we see with our customers, a very interesting trend that's happening where you're seeing a lot more VPs of sales and like CROs come from a more operationally minded background. So like the woman who's the CRO at GitHub is a woman named Erica Anderson, and like she used to be their head of sales ops.
Yeah.
Right. A customer of ours, a gentleman named Will Foley, is like, he's currently the acting head of sales for a company called Brazen, but he's a sales operations person by background. He's like very process orientated. He's like a Six Sigma certified, et cetera. I think he worked at GE like when he first got out of college. But like those are and I don't want to make it sound like only those sort of people can have success, but it's that you have to have the muscle or be willing to adopt the new muscle. Yes. And you can see this again, kind of like in advanced athletics, where like if people have ever seen like the movie Moneyball, right? It was like the mid '90s in America, like in the Oakland A's and American baseball, and you had a bunch of people who are like, no, get out of here with like your numbers, get lost, kid, et cetera, et cetera. And like all those people got like fired, right? Because like they like refused to like adopt a new source of advantage. It's like not adopting fire. Like, what are you doing? Right. And and like you're going to get replaced. Right. Yeah. Like, and we see this constantly where like, the gray hair like cycles out, and like the people who are willing to adopt new technology and new process and new state of the art come in and take over and take the organizations to the next level.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect place to wrap it up. Like that's the impact. That's the one you're talking about, like the risk of not, what do you think the risk is if you not doing the thing?
What's the negative implication? Yeah. Why change? Why now?
It's number one, you're going to get fired. Number two, your sales org, you're not going to know what's going on. Number three,
let's talk about the positive benefits. I mean, come on now. Like, I mean, you have a couple kids, right? Like, you want them to go to a really nice college. Like, let's blow out your number here.
Give them some cash,
right?
Yeah.
Let's make sure that your entire organization across the board is like getting into accelerators, and you're blowing out the number. Your board's going to be really happy with you, and man, I can only imagine that what those headhunters are going to say when they're bringing you those next opportunities for the next hot company, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just get on the train here. Let's get data driven.
I'm sold, Pete.
So like DocuSigns in your inbox.
Great. Well, people have listened. They're also sold. If they want to learn more from you, if they want to learn more about how to, operationalize all this stuff that they've talked about, how can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, just check out our website, go to atriumhq.com. We have a ton of resources on like data-driven sales management. A bunch of the stuff is like written by me. It's like written, there's recordings, there's all sorts of stuff. Like however you like to kind of like learn new stuff. If you're a text person, you're a video person, etc., go there. You can also just set up a free Atrium account. Atrium takes like 5 minutes to set up. You just pop in there, you sign in with your Salesforce account, and you're on your merry way. It'll get you dialed in with like a world-class analytics harness. Folks can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Peter Kazanjy to be found on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's pretty easy. Like, we're the only person in the United States with that weird name. But yeah, like, look me up. Also, I think another thing that would be useful for folks is we also run the nation's largest sales operations and leadership community. It's called Modern Sales Pros. It's absolutely fantastic community education resource for folks. It's free to join. It's only for sales operations, sales management, sales leadership, sales enablement. So it's not for individual contributor like BDRs or AEs. It's for people who like mind the store, if you will. But it's also a really fantastic resource for folks. So those are all resources that can be very helpful for people to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also had the book, if you'd flash it up one more time on the old screen.
Yeah,
and where can people grab a copy of that?
You can just go to foundingsales.com. In fact, the whole book is actually available online for free. So it's just like it's just like, it has its own website. My wife designed it. She's a graphic designer and a web designer, and so the whole book is available for free. Or if you like it in the form of like hard copy or Kindle, it's available for purchase online as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Pete. That was a really interesting episode. I'm really excited for people to hear this one.
Super awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. And thanks to all of you guys for joining us on another episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast. Please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button on YouTube so that you can be notified each week when we have great guests joining us like Pete, other revenue leaders, other marketing leaders, sales leaders, CSMs, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Smash that subscribe button.
Smash it. See ya.